Good morning. Is it on? Yeah, it's on. Okay. Good morning. As everyone is finding their seats, I want to welcome you here this morning. I'm Regina Heinrich, Director of the Stevens Center for Family Business, and delighted that you're here on this foggy fall morning. You've likely heard the quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. I can do that sometimes. But anyway, this is what our keynoter, Kathy Carroll, is going to explore with us today. How can family business leaders remain true to their family values, their family ties and obligations, while at the same time adhering to strong business practices and policies which may be directly opposed? Kathy will help sort this out and offer ways for resolving the common conflicts, dilemmas, and polarities that often occur in family businesses. In addition to her keynote presentation for us in this room, Kathy will facilitate an hour-long peer group session for Scfb members to probe the subject in more depth, beginning at 9:45 a.m. in banquet room C, right next door. Members who represent their family firm's leading generation, next generation, as well as key non-family executives are invited to gather and engage in discussion about some of the finer points of leading with both love and logic. But wait, there's more. To reinforce Kathy Carroll's powerful message, we have a copy of her book, Hug of War, for each family business member firm and sponsor organization attending today. They'll be available for you to pick up at the end of this session, so please don't leave for home without it. Before we move on, I'd like to quickly call your attention to the other Stevens Center for Family Business major events that will occur during 2025-26. You'll see a handy bookmark on your tables with the schedule of events that are happening, right? Oh. So I hope you'll put that information into your calendar and plan to attend. In my humble opinion, we have an outstanding series of family business presentations and topics coming up, and of course, we want you to take full advantage of all of them. My deep thanks to Casey Stevens, the Center's Associate Director, and to Andrea Henning, Program Coordinator, for all of the work, creativity, time, attention to detail that went into designing, developing, and promoting these events. A shout out too to the Center's new student intern, Troy Loringer, who came on board earlier this month. Now it's my honor to introduce Paul Altman, President and CEO of Vantage Plastics, which has been a member firm of the Stevens Center since 2010. Paul currently serves as the chair of our executive council. Please welcome Paul Altman.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. On behalf of the staff and the executive council, we thank you for being here. You're wanted and welcome guests here every time. I want to reiterate a little bit what Regina said, and we've got a great turnout for the breakout sessions coming up. Those are really valuable. You can dialogue with people that are in the same arena that you are and share ideas and share thoughts relative to today's topic or any other topic. So I want to start by, we have a few new members that are going to be joining the Executive Council. I had the great pleasure and opportunity to meet a couple of them last night, actually, and they're going to be fantastic additions to the Executive Council. But so I'm going to ask, we've got 5 new members, 2 member representatives and 2 sponsor representatives. I'm going to name their names. If you would please stand, and then when we're done, we'll give them a round of applause. Member representatives are Jenna Miller, 2nd generation of the Workwear Store. Dakota Crump, he's 3rd generation of York Repair. Sponsor representatives are Josh Eggert of Warner Norcrest Judd LLP and Kostopovich of Braun Hendrick and Eric Sawatsky of Yo and Yo. Thank you all for becoming members. Next, I'd like to acknowledge the organizations who have been supporters of the Stevens Center now in its 25 years of existence. The center's loyal and dedicated sponsors whose financial support is invaluable. And as I say the company's name, representatives, if you're here, please stand up to be recognized. And again, we'll hold the applause till the end. I want to say these sponsors are very critical to us being able to continue. And if you have a need that a sponsor can help you with, please consider them as you're going about your business. You know, these are in some cases family businesses, but businesses that depend on us as Stevens Center family businesses for their livelihood too. So make sure you consider them as you are looking for business opportunities and needs. So we'll start with First State Bank, AKT Peerless, Braun Kendrick, Carson Wealth, Fifth Third Bank, Frankenmuth Credit Union, Dan Handley and Associates, Dale Carnegie Training, the Huntington Bank, Independent Bank, the Pendleton Baumgartner Group, Morgan Stanley, Thymation Strategy Group, Plant Moran LLC, PNC Bank, Raymond, Rick Olson Seminars, John Wyrick, Saginaw Bay Underwriters, TriStar Trust Bank, Warner Norcross Judd, Winelander Fitzhugh, and Yo and Yo. Deep thanks for your commitment to the center, and a round of applause for all you guys. The Stevens Center is a membership organization, and recently we had a family business become a member of the center. It's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to Dobson Industrial. Dobson Industrial, and this is long, I didn't know they did so much. You know, I want to say that they did a lot for Vantage Plastics in our Bay City facility, still do. But as any of you that's been in here, we've got a lot of big equipment, and it takes some brute to move it around, and Dobson was critical in that and still help us yet today in many things. But Dobson is located in Bay City. Dobson Industrial specializes in structural and miscellaneous steel fabrication, machinery moving, installation and rigging, industrial maintenance and millwright services, specialized transportation and heavy hauling, storage, warehousing and logistical services, water jet cutting technology, commercial doors, frames, and hardware. Additionally, Dobson Industrial has a significant role and took a significant role in the Scott L. Carmona College of Business building right here on the campus at SVSU. Please welcome with me Dobson Industrial with a round of applause. It's also my pleasure to welcome some family business guests who are with us this morning. We hope that, again, you're wanted and welcome, and hope that today will solidify your joining the family business as a permanent member. And these members are Campbell Trucking, who I had the chance to meet here a little bit, and I had to get their card because I think we can do some business with them. See, you've already paid for your membership, maybe. Miller Holdings, RMC, and Sign Image. We're very glad to have you here this morning to participate with us, and hope that you will join soon. Thank you, guys. Now I'd like to welcome Lindsay Stephen Eggers, Secretary of the Stevens Investment Holdings. Lindsay is the newly appointed Stevens Family Representative to serve on the Stevens Center for Family Business Executive Council. The Stevens family has been supporting us since the beginning. We appreciate that, and we appreciate Lindsay coming on to help us continue going forward. Lindsay, please.
Good morning and thank you, and it will be an honor to serve on the Executive Council. Obviously, this group has been so critical to our family company and was very dear to both my parents, so it's just wonderful to continue their legacy. I get the honor today of introducing our keynote speaker, Kathy Carroll. She is the granddaughter of an entrepreneur who led a Fortune 500 company and the daughter of an entrepreneur. Following a 20-year corporate career at United Airlines, she left it to lead her father's business. Kathy learned about family business the best way you could by leading it. I do agree. Kathy holds an MBA from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and a BA from Boston College. She earned her certificates in leadership coaching and executive facilitation at Georgetown University. Kathy founded Legacy Onward, Inc. to support family business leaders through the complexities, which there are many, of family business ownership. In 2024, Kathy's book, Hug of War, How to Lead a Family Business in Both Love and Logic, was published. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Carroll to the podium with a warm round of welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to invite a slight change in slides, and then I'll get started. The magic is about to happen. While we're waiting, I just want to express a specific thank you to Casey, who has been spectacularly warm and welcoming to me. So thank you very much for all of you've done. Yeah. Okay, meet Mike. Mike was one of my earliest clients, and when I arrived at his office, he was on the telephone. So I waited outside of his door, and I heard this bellowing, really unhappy, grumpy sounds. And I thought, good grief, is this my potential new client? I'm not sure I want to work in this environment. But eventually he got off the phone, and he welcomed me into his office, and he couldn't have been kinder. And as we sat down and we had our pleasantries, I said, what brings you to coaching? And he said, I am a serial entrepreneur. I have started and successfully sold 8 businesses. This is my 9th, and it's making me crazy. I don't understand what is going on, but I am not myself. I haven't yelled in 30 years. Now I find myself screaming and yelling all the time. And I discussed it with my wife, and she pointed out that it's the first time I've worked with family. And he said, that made me think, maybe I need to find a coach who specializes in family. Off we went. So as he continued to tell me what the distinctions were, he said, I am working with my daughter, Mila. Mila is a terrific young daughter. She, however, has been in and out of rehab most of her high school and later years. She's now in recovery, and she's doing quite well in that front. However, I invited her into this business because I wanted to give her something to carry forward after I stepped away. I wanted to have something for her. And I was really hopeful that she would grow into a leader into this business to carry it forward. And she's still young, but she is not performing. She is really struggling, and I'm not sure how to handle it. In addition to that, she's partnered with Malachi. And Malachi is worse. He claims to be the linchpin of this business, but he's in the sales department, and I've got the data to prove he is not performing. He is so arrogant. I mean, he doesn't even come to the office 5 days a week. How on earth could he be the linchpin of this business? And so it's really clear I've got 2 very poor performing employees. However, they have the love of my life, my granddaughter, Michaela. And I'd be terrified to let them go, because if I let them go, then they're going to have a hard time replicating the income. I'm kind of overpaying them. And so I'm not confident they could get a job here that would be able to afford their lifestyle, which means they might have to leave town, and then I would have marriage problems. Meet Mary. She babysits Michaela every day, and there is no way she is going to be separated from her granddaughter. So Mike was absolutely stuck, beside himself, and didn't know what to do. He had two different logics in mind in his brain at the same time. One logic was the business mindset, which is driven by logic, and it values profits and competition and meritocracy. And the other mindset was the family mindset, which is driven by love, and it values fairness and sharing and unconditional belonging. And when he used his business mindset, he had a really clear right answer. They need to go. And when he used his family mindset, he had a really clear right answer. They need a raise. So he had these two competing right answers in his head at the same time, and he couldn't reconcile it. He couldn't make sense of it all. And that was the really core part of his frustration. So over the course of the next several minutes, close to an hour, I'm going to introduce you to polarity thinking by telling 3 different stories. That was the first story. I'm going to tell 2 more stories. And after every story, I'm going to introduce you bit by bit into this concept of polarity thinking as a way to integrate opposites or harmonize polarized opposites. And first, let's talk about what is a polarity. So a polarity is a set of interdependent opposites. Interdependent meaning they actually define each other. If you think about wet and dry, dry doesn't exist without wet, wet doesn't exist without dry. In leadership, if you think of leadership styles, bold doesn't exist without humble. Humble doesn't exist without bold. If you think about the needs of the Stevens Center for Family Business, you've got the needs of the founding members who have a lot of experience in this space and the needs of the newer members who are newer to the space. So the tension that the Stevens Center is managing is how do we provide value to the founding members and the newer members at the same time, which is a wonderful tension to manage. And I think so far you guys are, from what I can tell, doing a terrific job of it. So here's a little pop quiz. Now that you know what a polarity is, we're going to do a quick test. Appetizer and dessert, polarity or not a polarity? Does appetizer define dessert? Can you have a dessert without an appetizer? Yes, okay, not a polarity. Good. Second one, mountains and beach. Is this a polarity? No, no. How about short-term and long-term? Yes, a polarity. Short-term doesn't exist without long-term. Long-term doesn't exist without short-term. And then my favorite one of all, inhale and exhale. Yes, inhale and exhale is a classic polarity. In fact, when people first learn polarity thinking, this is the one that you often start with. This is the one that we manage all day long, all night long, for all of our lives, mostly unconsciously. So let's figure out how to map it. The first thing you do when you're facing a polarity is map it. And you start by saying, what's my aspiration? Well, in managing the inhale-exhale polarity, our aspiration is to live. And what is our aversion at the bottom? Our aversion is to die, right? So once we have that clarity, our shared purpose is to live, what we're trying to avoid is to die, then we map the polarity by putting one pole on one side and one pole on the other side. In this case, we have inhale on this side, exhale on that side. Next step is to define the benefits and the overuses of every pole. So what are the benefits of inhaling? You get oxygen, right? Quite simple. What happens, however, if you over-inhale without exhaling? You end up with too much carbon dioxide. It's called hypercarbia, according to Google. What about exhaling? What are the benefits of exhaling? You get rid of the carbon dioxide, but what happens if you only exhale without inhaling. You don't get enough oxygen, right, and you die. So what we're doing is we're constantly managing this tension by flowing between inhale and exhale. Now, not every polarity has this rhythmic component to it that breathing has, but that's how we're managing the tension between these opposites. We're cycling between the inhale and then the exhale, back and forth, in order to serve our greater purpose, which is to live, and avoid our deepest fear, which is to die. That's the step number one with managing any polarity. Map it. So I'm going to introduce the first two key polarity principles. The first is polarities cannot be managed. Polarities cannot be solved. They must be managed. You can't say, should I inhale or exhale to live, right? You can't say, should I be a bold leader or should I be a humble leader? We all have preferences. However, really, the best, most talented leaders have the ability to be both bold and humble based on the context, based on the purpose, based on their bigger goals. So you can never ask the question, should I inhale or should I exhale? You're always going to be managing the tension between those opposites. The second principle is both poles of a polarity represent an equally important point of view, and neither alone is complete. You need both the inhale and the exhale. You need wet and dry. You need centralization and decentralization. You need strategy, you need execution. These are interdependent. You can't do one without the other, or you're going to fall into what you want to avoid, your deepest fear. Okay. Story number 2 is my story. This is my grandfather in the middle. He was a very successful entrepreneur. I grew up with him as my grandfather, and he was a terrific person. Let's see, do I have a little pointer on this? I do. I'm this one right here, and this group over here is my family, and I'll do the same over here if I can. I'm the one with the elbow. There we go. I've got the elbow there on my niece's leg. This was a 1986 Christmas card. And so my grandfather was a very successful entrepreneur. And frankly, as a grandchild, I saw a lot of drama in my father's generation. My father's the second of 4 children, and it was drama, drama, drama. So the last thing I wanted to do was be a part of that family business. So I went my own direction. But when my grandfather died, my father and his siblings hired attorneys, and over the course of 2 years, they found a way to divide up his estate. And my father inherited some industrial machinery companies that he knew very little about. So he promptly sold them, and he bought companies in his passion, his personal passion, which is team roping. Team roping is a competitive rodeo sport. I don't know if team roping is popular in this part of the country, but it is not popular, okay. And my father got really involved in team roping when my parents divorced about 30 years ago. And it was a really tough, protracted 6-year divorce. And at the end of it, he lost his family, he lost his friends, and in all honesty, his parents sided with my mom in the divorce. So it was a really tricky situation for him. And so he rebranded from a country club golfer, we grew up on the North Shore of Chicago, to a gentleman cowboy. And he bought trucks and trailers, and eventually he had steer, and he would do roping arenas, and he started really diving deep into the team roping world. And so as he sold these industrial machinery companies, he bought companies in his new passion. He had 5 companies. We make ropes and saddles and training equipment for professional cowboys. And at this point, the companies were losing money. And so he decided it's a little bit back up. He bought all these companies, and these became his social base. So the people who ran, the cowboys who ran the companies became his best friends. And it was terrific, and they were terrific people. And the companies were not thriving. One was about break even, the rest, the other 4 were actually not performing. So my father decided to hire a president and chief operating officer. He engaged with a recruiter and put a position out there. And at the same time, my sister, who knew that I was at United, said, you know, I don't know if you're interested in this, but I think Kathy would be an interesting president and chief operating officer. So let me put a pin in that story, and then I'm going to give you my story and catch you back up. And this was in 2009, this was happening. So in my career, as you beautifully said, thank you very much, I had started my career as a pension actuary. I spent 6 years with a calculator attached to my hip. Then I went back to school, got an MBA. Then I spent 12 years in the travel industry, 6 at Sabre, which is a technology company affiliated with American Airlines, and then 6 years with United Airlines. And by 2009, I was a mid-level professional at United. I was working in the sales department, and I was bored, and I was frustrated. My core competency that I had developed was laying people off. And that was not an enjoyable strength to build. And the airline industry is a tough industry. It really struggles to recover its cost of capital. But in any case, I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, and I didn't see anything at United that interested me. So I was actually interviewing with my very first company, Hewitt Associates, when I got a call from a recruiter saying, hey, I'm interested in talking to you about a company in the rodeo space. And sure enough, fast forward, I figured out pretty quickly what was going on. But this recruiter put me through every pace. I went through every interview. I did every single thing. And big surprise, I got a job offer. And I was frankly ambivalent about whether or not to take it because I had two competing mindsets about this, both on the family side and on the business side. On the business side, the upside, or the pro that I saw, was this was going to be an opportunity for me to grow into a much bigger leadership opportunity. I was a mid-level executive at a large organization, and I would have become a top executive at a much smaller organization. And that kind of excited me. I was ready for a bigger leadership challenge. At the same time, this is a rodeo company. I'm based in Chicago. I'm a woman. I have a service background, not manufacturing. I was going to be managing cowboys in Texas, and I was the daughter of the owner, and this was my first rodeo. So not many people get to say that. I get to say that. And so I was pretty concerned about my credibility. I wasn't sure how I would fit in with this group of terrific people, but I knew that my background is as much as I had a really solid, terrific, helpful business background, it really wasn't well suited to this particular industry. So I had concerns there. And on the family side, the pro was that I was going to get a chance to lead the family business. And you all know what that feels like. It is super special to be in a family business. And I was going to get to be the hero, right? I was going to get to turn the companies around. And that held an enormous amount of appeal. And frankly, my siblings were very keen on me doing it as well because I was going to be saving their future inheritance, according to them. However, on the downside, I did not have an historically warm, loving relationship with my father. He was a tough dad. And so I was concerned about making myself financially vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable to my father again after, I was in my 40s at this point. And so I was a little concerned about whether or not it was the right fit. And I thought about it at length, and I finally decided, you know what? One of two things is going to happen if I take this job. Either I'm going to learn to admire and respect and maybe even love my father in a way that I wasn't able to do at a younger age, or I was going to get into therapy, and I figured either option was going to be a successful option. So I decided to give it a go, and my father wrote the recruiter a check for $75,000 to hire his daughter, and I'm not kidding. And it was a blast. I really had the time of my life leading that business. The Cowboys are just terrific human beings. I got to be in and explore parts of our country that I had never seen before. I got to learn an industry that I knew nothing about, and it was just a beautiful, wonderful place. And working for my father was hard. He was a difficult manager, much like he was a difficult father. And I'll give you a few examples of how we saw the world in very different ways. My father loves to spend. If he's going to buy one truck, he will buy 4 trucks and figure out where the other 3 are going to go. And so what was I all about? I was all about saving. I have the first dollar I ever earned. I'm very conservative with money. My father loves to disrupt. I'll give you an example. We had a catalog that we would publish every year for the Denver market. And every year he would work with the marketing team to bring this catalog to life. Now, a little bit about my father and his leadership. He is, to this day, the CEO of the companies. However, he is in his late 80s and he's suffering from dementia, so he's not able to lead. Back when I was working with him, he was in his 70s, mid-70s, and he was based in Santa Barbara. Our headquarters was in the suburbs of Chicago, and the companies were split between Texas and Colorado. So we had an unusual organizational structure, and that's what it was. So he didn't really get involved in leadership in a meaningful way. However, he loved marketing. Marketing was his absolute favorite domain to play in, and he got involved really deeply in the marketing space. So every year, he would collaborate very closely with the marketing department to put together our catalog. And for really months, they would put this together. And then at the very end, they would send him a final draft of the catalog. And they'd say, okay, here's the last version. You've got 48 hours to make any changes. And in the next 48 hours, he would rip that thing apart and just start over. And the marketing department was devastated every single time. And they would have to then scramble to try to get something going. They might have to pay extra for shipping. They might have to pay extra for printing, expedited printing. And sometimes they wouldn't even have a catalog for the show. And it just made them crazy. And it just made me crazy because it reminded me of all the disruption that I experienced when I was a kid. So what was I all about? I was about stabilizing. I was about process. I was about structure. I was about let's do something that's replicable. Let's document. Let's put all this structure in place so that we can stabilize our process and minimize what to me felt like the chaos that my father was creating. My father's leadership style in the office was much like his parenting style. So his leadership style was command and control. I didn't like that as a kid, and I didn't like it working with him as well. The example I'll use, and this is actually the example that led to my departure from the business, is the following. We conducted a series of strategic plans for each of the companies. We did 5 different strategic plans, and I insisted that my father be a part of these planning processes because I knew if he were not a part of it, he would not buy into the strategy. So he was a part of it. We were humming along. We were doing quite well. And then all of a sudden, my father started calling the general managers, his cowboy friends, and calling them and instructing them to do the opposite of the strategic plan. And so the cowboys would call me and say, your father just told me to do X. What's going on? And I'd say, I don't know. Let me look into it. I would talk to my father. I'd get a little of the runaround. A week later, a different cowboy came forward and said, hey, your father just told me to do this. What's going on? I don't know. Let me find out. Well, this kept happening. So after a few months, I said, all right, I think we need to have a conversation. And we met in Greenville, Texas. And after I plied him with his favorite bourbon and some salami and cheese, I said, I think we are creating confusion in the operating companies because we're speaking from 2 different leadership voices. And I have an idea. My idea is that you and I get really clear on what success looks like, and you hold me accountable to the results. You've been talking about wanting to spend more time on the golf course, spending more time with your new wife, Tina. I want to help make that happen. Let's just get really clear on what success looks like, and then hold me accountable. And he said, are you asking to be the CEO? I said, no, this is not a title issue. I'm just trying to create a little bit more stability and consistency in the organizations because we're confusing people with these different directions. And he said, absolutely not. I am the CEO and everyone needs to know it. And that's when I knew that I wasn't going to be able to succeed in that environment. I couldn't do it. And I started to see my father as an obstacle. And you can imagine, as my father was a command and control leader, I built an identity around being a servant leader, and I couldn't serve these wonderful cowboys because I saw my father as the obstacle to success. What was tough for me as I reflect back on this, and this took me a long time to identify, what was the hardest part, and there were two big ahas. The first aha, I'll describe as follows. This came sooner than the second aha. The first aha was that I think as I succeeded as a leader in the business, I disrupted something far more important to my father than profits. We were humming along, we were doing quite well. That didn't matter so much because his cowboy friends stopped calling him. I was providing the leadership that they needed, and they called him, but they didn't call him at the same level. And I think that challenged his relevance, his identity, and it brought back all the drama of his divorce when his friends sided with my mom, and this time they were siding with his daughter. And that was way too much for him to bear, and he needed to reassert himself as the leader of that business. The second aha had a lot more to do with me, and it took me at least 5 years to finally own up to my part in the dynamic. But my ego was in front. I was on a mission to prove that I was right and he was wrong, that my leadership style was the right leadership style, that saving and stabilizing and servant leadership is the right way to lead. And I didn't realize that I was managing polarities. I did not realize. I didn't see the value of spending. But what's that saying go? You can't save your way to profitability, right? I didn't see the value of disruption. But I ran the risk of leading a very complacent, boring organization. I didn't see the value of command and control. But man, in a crisis, I don't want to bring a group together and say, well, what do you think is the best way to move forward? No, you, CPR, you, 911, right? There's a place for command and control leadership. It's an important skill to have in your leadership toolkit. There are times when it matters, and then there are times when servant leadership is the way to go. And there are many other leadership styles as well. What I didn't realize is that all my childhood injuries, all the things I didn't like being his kid, were driving my motivation. I was trying to be the hero to the family, and really what I was doing was trying to keep him off to the side so that he didn't create the chaos and disruption that I felt. I'm not proud of it. I was not my best self. And again, you can see why it took me a long time to own up to that. But I was not a partner to the owner of that business. Still 100% owner of the business. I wanted vindication. And you can see how I built my identity around not him, right? Everything that I was not him. And what I realize now is that we needed each other. He needed me to keep him out of the overuse of his strengths, and I needed him to keep me out of the overuse of mine. And that was a tough pill to swallow because I was so attached to being right. Okay, so let's talk about two key polarity. I think I need a glass of water. That story I tell, it's tough every time I tell it, to be frank. Okay, the first key polarity principle is we all have pole preferences, and our preferences are born from an aversion to the overuse of the opposite pole, or the downsides of the opposite pole. So all of my preferred styles of leadership were born from an aversion to all the overuses of the leadership my father demonstrated, which I knew very well because I was his daughter. Right? That's inherently true. We all have pole preferences, and it's normal. It is okay. As you heard me talk about, spend and save, disrupt and stabilize, command and control, and servant leadership. You all thought to yourself, oh yeah, there's one that's better than the other, right? I'm sure everyone kind of had an attachment to one style over another style. It's normal, and that's okay. But remember, both are equally important when you're facing a polarity. And secondly, once we recognize the downsides or the overuses of a pole, we tend to swing to the opposite side, right? I swung from my father's preferred style, I swung really hard the other direction. And in fact, the farther he went that way, the farther I went that way. And that's one of the other elements of polarities. You can imagine this is kind of what's happening in our political environment these days, right? We've got one group going one direction and one group going the other direction. And the more we press it, the further apart we get. Okay. So, my third and final story. Meet the Patels. Rajesh is the CEO of the business. Ooh, these images came out a little wonky. That's okay. And they have 2 children. Jasmine is the chief marketing officer of the business, and she owns 10%. Nirav owns 10%, but he's the lead singer for the Audio Degas, and they're on a break from a national tour. He's quite a talented musician, I should say. And Jasmine is engaged to Jay. They're engaged to be married. And Nirav is married to Pammy. And they are struggling right now because their CFO just announced that he is going to retire in 18 months. And so they are trying to build a plan for how to replace their CFO. As they talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, they realize that they're spinning in circles, they're just stuck. They're just having the same conversation and going nowhere. So they decide to hire this woman named Anita. And Anita has been introduced to them as a miracle worker in the family business space. She has somehow found paths forward that never in the world could have existed. And so they're taking a chance on Anita. So I'm actually going to read a script of how a conversation took place. Each person's going to speak twice. It's just mom, dad, and the 2 kids. Each person's going to speak twice, and my challenge to you is to listen for the polarities. See how many polarities you can hear when I tell this story, okay? This is a smart group of people, so I'm going to push you a little hard. Okay, it starts off with like this. Jasmine. She says, we really need to replace our CFO, and I think we should hire Jay. Jay is a cost accountant. He is a specialist in accounting, and I've been asking for product level P&Ls for 2 years. We have not gotten them. And look, as a marketing person, how can I measure profitability without understanding what our P&L is by product line? Jay can help solve that problem. Nirav then says, I get it, but for crying out loud, we spent years negotiating our family employment policy, and we finally settled on a policy that we all could hold hands and agree to, and that is 5 years of work experience and an MBA. He doesn't have an MBA. A CPA is not an MBA. Why would we bother changing this? We put so much time into this family employment policy. Why wouldn't we abide by it? Defeats the purpose of having one. Then Purvi, mom says, well, I'm with Nirav, but for different reasons. What if they get divorced? To be honest, I don't really like the idea of Jay knowing so much about our financials. And I'm worried about, what'll happen if they marry. What is the statistic? Almost half of the marriages end. Although I just read recently, to be honest, that it's now 40% instead of 50%. So that's kind of exciting to hear. But nevertheless, then Jasmine comes back in. Mom, full transparency builds trust. I'm about to spend my life with Jay. I want to be in a transparent relationship. I don't want to have any secrets. I want to build our relationship with a foundation of trust. I also don't want him to feel like a second-class citizen or an outlaw. That's not a good way for him to be welcomed into the family. And Nirav, as far as you're concerned, why would we stick to a structure in the family employment policy that's not serving our needs? Yeah, it's fine to have a policy, but this is a worthwhile exception. We really should be more flexible on these policies. Then Rajesh chimes in. I'm not so worried about a divorce, to be honest. They've signed the prenup, so that's kind of a done deal. Plus, Jay's always going to be the father to their children, and I'd frankly like to have a son-in-law who understands enough about the business that he can help support our grandchildren to understand the business. The reason why I want Jay in the business is he is really, really smart. I think he's going to be a terrific addition to the team. Nirav then says, look, Dad, I like Jay as a person. He's all right, but Actually, you know what, as I think about it, he's really good with alternative investments. I'm gonna be starting a new fund, a search fund for my, my music business, and he's been giving me some great advice on how to get that going. But it's really hard for us to make decisions as a group of four. Look at how much we've been having this conversation for too long. We can't make decisions as a group of four. Now we're gonna add Jay into the mix, plus Jay's always gonna side with Jasmine. I'm never gonna get those dividends I've been asking for. I've been asking for dividends year after year after year. I never get them. Purvi says, Nirav has a point. Rajesh, Jasmine, you steamroll Nirav every year, and Nirav is really looking for seed funding for this new venture. And finally, Rajesh chimes in, well, you know, we've been investing back in the business time and time again because we've been trying to grow this business. And now we really have a good-sized business. It's very successful, and it's making me think we might have too many eggs in one basket. It might be time to start diversifying our investments. Oh my goodness, Anita, can you please help me figure out what to do? Right, so everyone goes silent, looks to Anita, and Anita says, well, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The bad news is there's no answer to your problem. The good news is you don't have a problem. You have a series of polarities, and let me explain what I mean. Polarities are a set of interdependent opposites, and you need both to exist. We can use polarity thinking as a different way to address your challenge. You are stuck in many ways, and I'll explain what I mean in a moment. So first of all, let me just pause and say, that's not an unrealistic conversation in a family business, is it, right? That was a very realistic conversation. Many of you have probably had the same conversation or some version of it. What polarities did you hear in my story? This is a hard question, so how many polarities? Yes?
Policies that are the four corners doctrine and inflexible versus morphing them as needed.
Totally, yeah, exactly. Well said. Anything else? Yes?
The qualifications needed for the position that went from very rigid requirements to pure talent.
Yeah, good one. Next, yes?
Privacy versus transparency.
Nailed it. What else? Yes? Emotion versus logic, yes. I love it when people find polarities that I didn't even think of. That happens every time I do this. I love it. Okay, so we can keep going on. Here are the polarities that I found in this conversation. First one was structure and flexibility. You both nailed structure and flexibility. It was Nirav who was keen on providing a consistent, reliable process and that we can all agree on. And what was he worried about? He was worried about a loosey-goosey policy that would defeat the purpose of having a policy in the first place. What about his sister? She was keen on adapting to the changing context. That was the upside of flexibility. She was worried about the overuse of structure, which is rigid and flexible, and it keeps us from adapting to current context and situation. And what were they doing? They were arguing the diagonals. And here's what I mean about arguing the diagonals. Jasmine argued this diagonal, I guess you can kind of see it, the upside of flexibility, the overuse of structure, and Nirav argued the opposite diagonal. You can see it over here too. You can see how I've got the arrows. The arrows are showing the diagonals. And what happens is you just talk over each other. You're not listening because one person is speaking the truth and the other person is speaking the truth. They're both right. That's what happens when you argue a diagonal. Everybody is right, but you only are seeing half the picture. This is what happens in Congress. We argue our diagonals all day long, right? And we're both right. That was very hard to me, to be perfectly frank. I know it's a little controversial to hold liberal and conservative as a polarity, but I'll invite you to just consider that it might be a polarity. When I first conceived of this as a polarity, it's not a new idea, it's out there. It was very hard for me to actually understand or believe in because I was very attached to my right pole. Like the pole that I thought was the right one, I was very attached to that pole. and I saw all the upsides of the ideology I believe in and all the overuses of the ideology that I don't. And when I started to frame it as a polarity and I put it on the map and I forced myself to say, what are the benefits of that other ideology? I was really shocked to see, well, there are some dang good benefits to that other ideology. That makes a lot of sense. Good grief. And what about the overuses of my preferred ideology? And I squinted my eyes and I said, oh, yes, there's some of that too. And it was really uncomfortable for me. But now I hold liberal and conservative in much more gracious space. And I see the truth of liberal and I see the truth of conservative and the goodness of both and what could be possible in our country if we started to think about liberal and conservative as a polarity. What new possibilities could exist? And I'll get there in how we actually dig ourselves out of these polarities in a moment. Okay. Invest and harvest. Super common in a family business. What do you do with profits at the end of the year? Well, you can invest or harvest, or you could actually think a little bit more creatively. So it was Rajesh and Jasmine who were keen on the invest side, and they were concerned about the overuse of harvest. And it was Nirav and, interestingly, Rajesh again, who saw the benefits of harvest and the overuses of invest. If you think about Rajesh, he actually saw the full picture, right? He had a preference for invest for a long time, but as he was maturing in his later years, he actually saw the benefits of taking some money out of the business as well. So he was able to see the full picture. How about transparency and privacy? That came up. Rajesh wanted to leverage talent, and he was worried about, it was Jasmine who was worried about inhibiting trust, and then it was Purvi who wanted the divorce issue on the table. Selective inclusive, this is a really common one, especially with people who marry into a family business. Do the married-ins get to participate in the family meetings? Do they get to own shares? Do they, you get the idea. So I'm not gonna go into every single one of these. I've got a limited amount of time, so I will keep going. But they were arguing the diagonals as well. And what happens when you argue diagonals is that you're just fighting each other because you're both right. So this leads us to two more key polarity principles. Arguing the diagonals puts force against force with no winner because both people are right. In addition, here's how you dig yourself out of it. To leverage the tension, which never goes away, you're never going to have an answer to an either-or question. You replace the either-or with both and. How do you get the benefits of this and the benefits of that? How do we get the benefits of conservative, the benefits of liberal? That's how you actually manage the tension of any polarity. So what did Anita do? She said, all right, we've got all these individual maps. Let's take all the benefits and put them on the upside. And let's take all the overuses or the things that we don't want to have and put them on the bottom side. And then let's change the question to, should we have structure or flexibility? Should we invest or harvest? And let's ask a different question. Let's ask, actually, how do we get leverage talent? How do we make sure everyone feels like they belong? How do we fuel business growth? How do we have a larger pool to draw from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And it was Purvi who said, let's have Jay start the family office, right? It addressed every single issue. They got everything that they wanted except the divorce piece. The divorce piece was a tough one for her. She had a hard time with that. So she decided to think about it and think about it. But they didn't have any of the overuses. They got all of the benefits. So now I'm going to walk through a series of slides that are going to introduce you to many, many, many of the common polarities that exist in the family enterprise space. And you all have these slides, so feel free to use them. And as I walk through them, see if there are any polarities that you're noticing. The slide before was succession and estate planning polarities. The next one, we've got reveal and conceal here, or transparency and privacy. The next one is family governance. See if there are any polarities that you are struggling with in your family. And as I go through these, I'm also going to share a few of the best practices with polarity thinking. So if you're a family member and you want to start using this, or if you're an advisor serving a family member or a family business, here are some of the best practices in how you map the polarity. First, you want to make sure that your pole names are neutral. So transparency and privacy is a great example of very neutral pole definitions. Now, the benefits and the overuses, they can be as filled with as much drama as you want, but just the pole names themselves, try to keep them neutral. And I'll give you, like transparency and privacy is neutral. Reveal and conceal can be a little bit tougher for some people because concealed has a little bit of a sneakiness to it, right? So conceal is probably not the best word. Transparency and privacy is a better way to hold that distinction. In addition, here's some philanthropy polarities. You want to have an equal number of benefits and overuses in every part of the map. And if you think about it, there's actually an energy cycle that happens between these things. So if you identify one benefit, follow the strength. Like what happens when you overuse that, and then what do you need more of on the other side, and it follows an energy cycle. Here's some ones in the Trustscape. And then last, if you're an advisor working with the family, use the family's language. Encourage the family. Don't try to overlay your language. Just a little inside coaching tip when you're doing it. And then finally, just common family enterprise polarities. Okay, now we get to have fun. You guys get to go identify a polarity that you are managing yourselves. So I'm going to encourage you to turn to page 7 of the handouts. And in the upper right corner, you're going to see a polarity map. And before you get too excited about it, start to think about your greatest strength. What is your greatest strength as a leader? What is your greatest strength as a professional? What is a strength that really makes you stand out? Something that you'd like read at your eulogy. Something that really makes you unique and different. Something you're super proud of. Think about what that strength might be. And then in that box on page 7, in the upper left corner, write down a couple words about what you like most about that strength. What do you like most about that strength? And then, once you've got that, what feedback do you get when you overuse that strength? What do people tell you when you're overusing that strength? And put that in the lower left side. Now, in the upper right part of the map, ask yourself, what do you need more of so that you don't fall into the overuse of your strength? What could you sprinkle into your leadership or into your work environment that would actually help you pull out of this overuse of your strength? And whatever you write down might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's not what you want to do. You have to worry about what would happen if you were in the overuse of that strength. If you were in the overuse, let me rephrase. If you do this thing that you need to do more of, if you sprinkle more of this opposite pole into your leadership, what do you worry about? What's at risk of happening? What could go wrong if you do too much of this other thing? And here's what often happens. We start off with our thing that we love. We love our strength, we do it, we keep doing it, then all of a sudden we do it too much and we get feedback that we're actually not doing that great, and we get uncomfortable feedback. So we say, okay, I'm gonna try to do a little bit more of this other thing. We do a little bit more of that other thing, but then we really quickly worry about we're in the overuse of that other thing, and so we zing back to our strength, because that's what we know, that's what we love, that's what we do, right? So we're in this sort of infinity loop with a really strong attachment to one pole. Did anyone have that experience? Yes, okay, good, definitely. Okay, so let's do an identity x-ray and see if we can reveal what happened. So what are the benefits of your preferred pole? Well, these are things that you want to be known for. This is how you want to be seen in the world. These are your strengths. Who wouldn't want this, right? And the overuses of your preferred pole are how maybe other people see you, or these could be blind spots that you're not aware of when you're in the overuse of your great strength. And if you're wondering, ask people who care about you deeply, they'll tell you. What about the upsides of the non-preferred pole? Well, these could be missing qualities that are inhibiting your leadership effectiveness. These could be untapped skills. And then the overuse of your non-preferred pole, these are things you don't like to be associated with, you don't like in other people. This is the stuff that makes you really uncomfortable. Right? Did this work? Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, love it. Okay, so 2 more key polarity principles. First, strong pole preferences are connected to a strength or an identity. Right? We have really strong preferences and they're connected to us at a very personal and emotional level. And harmonizing poles, which is this both and thinking, replace the either or with the both and, may necessitate facing your fears. Because you may have to worry about the overuse of that opposite thing that you don't like very much. In fact, one way to do this is to, once you've identified that you have something that you want to build and you're concerned about stepping into this opposite strength. Let's use bold and humble. Maybe you have a preference for humble and you want to try bold. It's really easy for the brain to associate the overuses of bold when you think about doing bold. So when that happens, when you're really concerned about the overuse of that opposite pole, define the assumption that you're making. If I do this opposite thing, this bad thing will happen. That's the assumption. If I am bold, I will be seen as a bully. That's the assumption. And then test the assumption. Test it with little itty-bitty micro experiments, little safe-to-fail experiments. Try something bold, something small that's bold, and see what happens. See if you come across as a bully. And keep doing that over and over and over again until you really feel confident about whether that assumption is true. That's how you build the opposite skill. It's little steps, one by one, to do it. And this is exactly what Purvi did. She was worried about the divorce thing. She was worried about trusting Jay. And so she designed these little micro experiments to test him. She wanted to give Jasmine a luxury watch for her birthday. And so she said to Jay what luxury watch would be a good brand. And she tested to see if Jay would tell Jasmine that she was going to get a watch. And Jay kept the secret. And so, all right, that was a little micro experiment. That worked. Let me try another one. And she ended up growing very fond of Jay. So this is polarity thinking. This is a very quick version of it. Polarity thinking is not new. Think of yin yang. This is ancient wisdom. Polarities, let me rephrase. Polarities are not new. Polarity thinking is new. But this is paradox. This is duality. This is dilemma, right? This is part of the natural life in which we live. It's polarity thinking that's new. It's getting out of the either or and moving to the both and, where you can see your path forward. And I'm going to list a series of books here so that if you're really keen on learning more about polarities, there's lots and lots of resources. There's plenty of videos on the internet as well. The first one is And. Barry Johnson is the grandfather of polarity thinking. I am actually going to be meeting him in October in person, and I'm kind of starstruck already about it. And the next book, Polarity Intelligence, is a slightly more accessible version of And it's people study polarities for years. There's a 2-year training program you can take. You're getting the very, very 101 version, and I took you through a lot very, very quickly. So if it's overwhelming, that's okay. It should be overwhelming. This is a pretty complex idea that I tried to distill into very bite-sized pieces, but it can be a lot to take in. So take it in slowly, read your books, watch your videos, and give it a try. I actually have a wonderful group of people who are specialists in this, and so if you really, really want to do it and you don't feel confident yourself, let me know and I'll introduce you to some of the colleagues that I work with who can help you through this. Hug of War is the book that I wrote. You're going to have that. It's sitting over there in the tables. I hope you take it home. And just as a little note on Hug of War, Although the theme of the book is polarities, it's not all polarities. The first several chapters are about power dynamics. There's some stuff about conflict, and it's very story-driven. It's like story, 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 kind of like what I just did. I told a story, and then I had some commentary about it. It's not until chapter 9 that you get into the really wonky process of how to unpack a polarity. So if you want some drama, read chapters 1 through 8. If you really want polarity thinking, go to chapter 9 and 10. And if you want it all, read the whole book. Navigating Polarities is the other book, the fourth book there. It takes a slightly more somatic approach, and it's terrific. It's just a little bit different. And then last, Family Business's Paradox is actually the first book out in the marketplace. Some of you probably know this book. It's popular with consultants and succession planning consultants, governance and succession planning consultants. And so I'm going to leave you with a few thoughts. This stuff isn't easy, but it's totally doable. And it's a way to transcend the conflict that you have in your family. If you are having a conflict and you recognize that it's a polarity, sit down with the people who are in this space, give them a little bit of information about it, have them watch the video of this session, and then get out a piece of paper and map. All you need is a plus sign. It's as simple as that. There's no hack other than a plus sign. Get out a piece of paper, draw a plus sign, name your poles, and then define what are the benefits and overuses of each one, and then ask, how do we get this and this? That's it. It's that simple. And yet, you could also take a 2-year certification training program, and it's that complex as well. Simple and complex. A polarity. What do you know? When you're dealing with polarities, you're not going to get a best answer because there is no best answer. That's a problem. Problems have best answers. Polarities don't. With polarity thinking, you're always looking for a better answer. And when your context changes, you revisit the polarity and you ask, is there another better answer right now? If the context doesn't change, it's serving you fine? Fine. When the context changes, you revisit the polarity and you assess whether or not you want to find a different both and, because it might be a better answer. Kind of like with structure and polarity. Structure and flexibility. It was a great solution, the family employment policy, until it wasn't. Context changed. They revisited how to actually hold that tension. And I'm going to leave you with 2 final quotes. Regina actually shared the second one. The first one is a heart quote. And before I even read the quote, I'll say, polarities aren't just an intellectual exercise. They're a very emotional experience. And the reason why I took you through that whole thing about what's your greatest strength is so that you got a sense for how personal and emotional this can actually be. You got a sense through my story with my preferences and my father's preferences, how personally emotional this can be. This is not just an intellectual exercise. This can be a very emotional experience as well. And so, my Brené Brown quote, "The need for either or is driven by our lack of capacity for vulnerability. Holding the tension is really hard." And the F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, which I'll say again because it's so good, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." And with that, I would love to take any questions. I think we've got some microphones floating around if anybody, we've got a question here, great. Microphone on its way.
Hi, Kathy. Rocco Ruczynski with PNC Private Bank. Thank you so much for sharing your polarity lesson with us.
Our pleasure.
I guess a question for entrepreneurs as they're building their business early on, and maybe it's at the beginning, the infancy stages. What advice would you give those entrepreneurs to surround themselves with that opposite and how to accept that as they're building their vision? Because as an entrepreneur, you have your own vision. Sure. And I'm experiencing this with my older sisters and older brother and younger brother, as I have a vision. And this vision is mine, but they shared the experience. We recently went to Poland.
Oh, wow.
And we came back, and it was life-changing for me. And I have a vision of a business that I want to create. And none of my sisters or brothers are business people. And so there's polarity in our family. But how do I adapt and adjust? Because I'm an inclusive person who wants to include them as this vision of mine, because it's all about family.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you, Rocco. Okay, so you're an entrepreneur, you've got a business idea, and you are on one end of a pole and your siblings are on the other end of a pole. Step number one is define the poles. What is it that you disagree on? Find that neutral term and then define what it is that you lean towards, what it is that they lean towards. And then decide what are the benefits of your point of view. You've got a very clear vision. What are the benefits of that vision? And then what are the benefits of their point of view? What is it that they bring of value, right? Then define what happens if you're in the overuse of yours. And make sure this is a polarity. The hardest part, honestly, the hardest part about this is defining the pole, defining the polarity, because it's a subtle distinction between a problem and a polarity, right? But if you truly have a polarity where they're interdependent pairs, they need each other to exist, they don't exist without each other, then use the polarity map and define think about what happens if I'm in the overuse of your preferred pole. What happens if they fall into the overuse of theirs? You probably know instinctively what the overuse of their point of view is, yeah. But you're seeing this diagonal, they're seeing this diagonal. Come together and map it out, and then ask, all right, now that we've got it all mapped, how do we get all of this and all of this? Instead of should we do this or this? Is that helpful?
It is. Thank you for my first coaching lesson.
I have a quick question too.
Sure.
Do you ever start with the non-preferred pole?
Sure, absolutely. You can start anywhere. The map is the map. I mean, honestly, when I'm doing this with clients, we're just throwing spaghetti on the wall. Do we have an equal number? Not usually. But I'll probe, like, all right, I've noticed that you've got 1 overuse over here, but 17 overuses over here. Let's think a little bit more about what could be the overuses over here, right? It doesn't matter where you start. Just put it on the map. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. Yeah. Yes, over here.
I think a lot of families can probably relate where you've got somebody who's on one side and somebody who's on another.
Yeah.
How do you recommend dealing with something in that way and trying to, because most people will just not talk politics, for example,
Sure.
Fathers, daughters, sons,
Right.
brothers, sisters. So how do you discuss it and try to get through that? Because somebody's going to say, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to discuss that with you.
Yeah. Well, especially when the prior conversations have been so emotionally heated. It's hard to re-engage when it's intense. So here's what's interesting about applying polarity thinking to politics. Our brains draw the conclusion that if they're right, then I'm wrong. And nobody likes to be wrong. So if my sister is right, does that mean I'm wrong? No, I'm not wrong. I know I'm right because I'm right. And when you frame it as a polarity, you can realize, we're both right. I see the rightness of her point of view. And I know the rightness of my point of view. And so when you are in these, once you engage, and I'll get to how you engage in a second. Once you engage, instead of saying, you're wrong, here I'm right, you're in the overuse of your, whatever the language is, you say, you know what, I see your point. I see there's truth in what you're saying, right? And that softening, that going from here to here, might invite her to go from here to here. And then maybe as you learn more about her point of view, you might come in a little here. And then she learns more about your point of view and you might come in a little here. And you're stepping closer to each other and you start saying, gosh, I see the value of your perspective. How do we get that without missing out on all the great stuff that I believe in? If you think about immigration policy, I think that's a great example of a liberal and conservative polarity. I think it's easy to say that the Biden administration was in the overuse of liberal ideology as it relates to immigration. And I think it's easy to say the current administration is in the overuse of the conservative ideology on the topic of immigration. If we started to talk about how do we get the benefits of the liberal and the benefits of the conservative on immigration, I think we could have a very different conversation and a very different outcome and a much more safe and humane approach to it. So how do you engage in conversations with people who don't want to talk politics? That's a little bit harder, especially when there's a lot of history. My first thought is, and I'm open to other ideas, my first thought is, hey, I've got some new ideas on politics and I kind of want to run them by you. Would you be open to having a conversation? If it gets hard, let's just stop. But I'd love to actually explore this in a different way. And when you have the conversation and your sister shares an ideology that you don't share, instead of replying with, you're wrong, here's why you're wrong, reply with, tell me more. Help me understand, because this is the part that I don't understand, and I really want to understand it better. And as you lean in to try to understand her point of view in a very genuine and authentic way, she might lean in and get more curious about your point of view. It's hard because we want to be right and we want to immediately point out when the other person is wrong. But instead of setting up the fight, right, instead of putting force against force, which is going to go nowhere, you get curious about their point of view in a very genuine and honest way. And that way, as you soften to her point of view, you can invite her, hey, I've got another point of view and I'd really love for you to listen to it and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. And if she says, yes, I'd be curious, then share your point of view. And then you can have a conversation about how you're both right. I don't know, that's the first thought. What do you guys think? Give it a try? Yeah. I mean, it's a series of experiments, right? But this is how we're going to bridge. This is how we're going to bridge together as families. This is how we're going to bridge together as a nation. I really do think this is the future of how we're going to come together. At least I hope. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Let's give her another round of applause, please. And as a token of our appreciation, I want to present you with a gift. It's a little spoiler alert. The gift is a photo frame that was personalized through the Product Innovation Center here by students in the Scott L. Carmona College of Business at SVSU. It holds a photo of you here on stage today, which we hope you will fondly remember. All right. Well, if that just kind of tantalized your taste buds for polarities and you'd like to learn some more, I know that we'll have an excellent conversation in our peer group session today, but I do also have copies of Kathy's book, Hug of War. We have one for each member firm, our guests today, and our sponsor firms. So those will be over in this back corner to pick up. They're already tagged with your firm on it, and it'll be easy for pickup with Andrea and Troy in the back here. Please designate someone from your firm to come and pick those up for us. And we are delving into polarities more in depth in our members-only joint peer group session today. The joint peer group will meet next door, directly next door in banquet room C. We have a large sign out there to help direct you on where to go. And I would love to give a special thank you to the hospitable SVSU Conference and Events team. We appreciate the top-notch service you have provided today. Please help me in giving them a round of applause as well. And I'm really excited about this next one. The next Stevens Center event will feature keynote speaker Casey Crane, third generation president and CEO of Crane Communications, which produces Crane's Detroit business, along with 25 additional international media brands. This fireside chat with Casey will take place here at SVSU on October 30th at 4 p.m. Email invitations will be sent out soon, so please RSVP for that event coming up. A few housekeeping reminders today before you depart. Please complete the post-event survey that's at your table. It's on a yellow sheet of paper. Please pull those out. Your feedback is vital and will provide valuable information and that we will share with our speaker, Kathy, here today, and the Scfb programming committee that's made up of different representatives from sponsors and our member firms so that we can continue to provide programming that meets your needs and helps you address some of those foundational family business best practices. If you are not attending peer groups, name tags, please place them in the bins outside the double doors, or you're also welcome to leave them at the table. We'll be coming around to collect those. And the program brochures on your table, those contain very valuable information. Please feel free to take them with you when you leave, especially those members attending the joint peer group sessions today. Feel free to take that program brochure with you, which that's again taking place in banquet room C right next door. Thank you all for attending, and on behalf of the SCFB team, we wish you all a fantastic day, and we look forward to seeing you again on October 30th. Thank you.